The information provided on Terminal Addiction Podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified provider with any questions you might have regarding medical or mental health condition. Never disregard professional advice or delay seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast. The views and opinions expressed by the guests, the hosts, are their own, and they do not necessarily reflect those of any affiliated organization or institution. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we make no guarantee regarding the completeness, reliability, or applicability of the content discussed. Listening to this podcast does not establish provider-patient relationship. If you're experiencing a medical emergency or mental health crisis, please contact emergency services or crisis line immediately.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Terminal Addiction Podcast. My name is Doug H.
And I'm Paul B.
How you been, Paul?
I'm doing all right.
Good. That's good to hear.
Arm is healing up and, just having a good time.
Yeah. Last time we talked, Paul was recovering from elbow surgery. So it's nice to see him back swinging a tennis racket. So, I'm really excited about today's episode, Paul.
Yeah. So am I. Somebody we hadn't seen in a long time, but very familiar to both of us.
Yeah. A good friend of ours, who recently moved last year. He is a former U.S. Congressman by the name of Bob Ney. Bob, welcome to our podcast.
Well, thank you, Doug and Paul. Glad to see both of you. It's always a pleasure.
Always good to see you, too. How's the move been down there? You getting all settled?
Well, it's temporary, but I came to Jackson, Tennessee. Now, I've been doing radio down here for 15 years. I was here 12 years ago for 2 days to do a fundraiser for a recovery center called Eastville, and didn't come back, but continued to do radio. So a new radio host asked me if I would move here, for a year or two and help him on his show and also to create a couple businesses. So I did October the 1st, and I went over to the Asheville Recovery Center where I hadn't been for 12 years. And I offered to volunteer, and they put me on the board. So they put me in.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad that's been going well. We do miss having you around this area. You've been very influential in my recovery and Paul's as well. It's really nice to just sit down and catch up with you a little bit. I'm guessing you've listened to maybe a little bit of our podcast, but just to fill you in on what we do here, we talk about addiction and recovery. Addiction and recovery in all shapes and sizes. Paul and I, both alcoholics and addicts. We probably could subscribe to another handful of other programs. But we're just here to get the message out to people who are either maybe in early recovery. Our target audience, started out being that person maybe a year or two in who has maybe worked the steps or been to treatment. Who's getting some of the things back in their life, but they sort of hit that little ceiling. And, sometimes people look around after a year or so and go, is this all there is? And so Paul and I wanted to come on and start this podcast just to talk to people about other avenues. We're also, trying to reach out and get a hold of anybody who may be currently struggling with any addictions, as well as try to provide some education and some information to people's families as well. So,
and just an update, we're at about 700 downloads now, so we're doing well.
Look at us. Are we going to have a cake when we get to 1,000?
I sure hope so.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I'm glad you're doing it. It's so worthwhile. Of course, I know both of you, and you've contributed so much to help other people. I know that for a fact. And I think your podcast is important. I've done a few podcasts this year, by the way, not my own, but I've been on them. Golf and Politics podcast, which was great, and a few other news podcasts. But I consider this one to be one of the more important podcasts that I could be part of. So I thank you for involving me.
Well, we hope you find it the best one.
I think it will be. I know both of you, like I said, so I think it'll be perfect.
Yeah, we really appreciate having you on, Paul and I. When we started doing this, it was just the two of us going back and forth. And then, we came up with the idea of trying to invite some people on. So we've reached out to, people involved in other recovery programs. We've reached out to some authors and actors and musicians, and we're still waiting to put together a schedule. But we really do appreciate you carving out some time here to come in and talk to us and share parts of your story and maybe touch on some things that maybe we haven't talked about yet. So.
Yeah, I think a good place to start would be, Doug and I both know the story, but kind of what happened, how you ended up, getting sober in the first place.
Well, sure. And I'll capsulize this. I don't want to make this a 2-hour lead. My name is Bob Ney, and I'm an alcoholic. And my story is like any other person with addictions or alcohol and drug addictions. We all collapse and fall the same way. It's just different ways that we get there and different things in our life that have happened. But we all share, of course, a feeling that at some point in time that we want to try to go into recovery and try to make our lives better. I was raised in the Ohio Valley in a little town called Blair, Ohio. My parents did not drink. I came from an extremely regular household, no trauma, no parents fighting. I had a very great family, 21 first cousins, all lived within 6 blocks. So a kind of Ozzie and Harriet type of existence. But the Ohio Valley was a two-fisted, beer-drinking, steel mill, coal miner type of place. So although my parents did not drink, and my mother used to warn me, remember your grandfather, because my grandfather was an alcoholic. And I would say, well, that has nothing to do with me. Later on in my life, I found out it did. But I ended up getting involved in politics. I always tell people, people do their leads and they say, there's some drugs in my leads. I want to pre-apologize. Well, there's some politics in my lead. I'll pre-apologize. Not political statements, but my life was later on, my entire adult life was consumed with politics. So I started out as a volunteer for a gubernatorial campaign, Governor Rhodes, and I ran for state chairman of college Republicans in 1975. It was party time, college campuses, and I was going to Ohio State University. And like anything, I was a binge drinker. I had drank in high school because in the Ohio Valley, you could drink. Didn't matter what age you were, 14, 15, 16, you could get alcohol at the back of any bar. And I did that with my friends. Got to college and progressed to binge drinking. But after all, I passed college, didn't I? Sure. I was involved in college Republicans. I got elected state chairman of college Republicans. I went on eventually and had a pretty quick start in a political career. I was a delegate for President Ford to Kansas City when I was about 19 years old. And again, a lot of booze parties. I found it fantastic. It was all free, and it wasn't stopping my career. I want to make that clear, in my mind at least, guys, for that point in time. And then I moved to Iran. We all know that's in the news these days, the country of Iran.
Sure.
And I was a teacher at the Iran-America Society, ran into the revolution of the Shah, and I moved then to back to the United States. Now, in between time, I was 25 years old and basically looked at this election for state representative. My congressman had won the election, and the district was 3% Republican in Ohio, Eastern Ohio, Belmont, Monroe, Noble counties. And a guy I worked with, Arnie Kleebone, turned to me and he said, Congressman Hayes won. He had a scandal in D.C., but they liked him and he won. He said he's never been beat. And I turned to Arnie, being the wonderful alpha alcoholic that I am, which prevails into my life in every aspect. Whatever I do it as an alpha alcoholic. So I turned to Arnie and I said, well, I can beat him. And Arnie said, well, it's 3% Republican. You're Republican. You don't have any money. And he's Congressman Hayes. He won after his problems in D.C. So I said, I can beat him. So I quit my job in Columbus, Ohio, working for the governor. And I went down to Blair, Ohio, and I beat him within 2 years. And I served in the Ohio House of Representatives. I was 26 by that time. I worked hard, and I drank hard. That's what I did. I worked to drink, and I drank to work. I then lost the election because I decided don't spend any money, don't raise any money, don't deal with the lobbyists raising, a ton of money. And I lost the election by 126 votes. So what did I do? I moved to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, of course. What else do you do?
As one would.
Oh, yes, as one would. And of course, it's a no alcohol kingdom. But no. Being clever as we are, my friends and I made alcohol, some of the probably worst wine you could find, but we made alcohol. Then I came back after 1 year and I ran for the state senate in Ohio, and we flipped the Senate, and that was 1984. So from 1984 to 1994, I was in the state senate. I became chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, the youngest, I think, in Ohio history at that time. It was a really good position. And I worked hard and I drank hard. And I drank to work and I worked to drink. And then I got recruited by Newt Gingrich to run for the United States Congress, and I got elected. I was the first one in 55 years as a Republican. Now, I keep saying this, Paul and Doug, not to say, look what I did, but to tell you this. Whatever I wanted, I went after it, and I got it. And I drank. So in my mind, I advanced in politics. I'm advancing making money. And I'm drinking. What a perfect combination was that for me? I didn't tell myself I needed to stop. Nobody ever told me I needed to stop. Now, I had a lot of close calls, blackouts, you name it. I had those close calls.
Sure.
But I ran for the United States Congress in 1994, and I won. Quickly excelled to chairman of the House Administration Committee. And again, I did my job. I worked hard. I didn't miss votes, and I drank. Because I drank to work and I worked to drink. And I kept winning elections. Got involved with a lobbyist named Jack Abramoff, and then everything started to implode. It was one of the most major scandals in modern day American history with Abramoff and the Native American tribes. And that's when my alcoholism went from a big alcoholic to alcoholism on steroids. I got the government after me. I'm going down the tubes. And what did I do? I just obviously drank more. I was an entourage social drinker. And with friends, in D.C. and with lobbyists and other people. But at the end, I became an isolated drinker. And my big moment was when my lawyer called me, because at this point in time, I spent $581,000 on a plea deal. I was going down the tubes, losing everything. I resigned from running in November. I resigned from the House in 2006. My lawyer said the government wants to do a plea deal, and they were pushing to do one. The government was. So I said, okay, I'm going to do a plea deal versus going to trial. Now, my lawyer called me, and I will never forget this as long as I live, and this is how I try to approach people. But Mo called me, Mark Toohey, and he said, listen, I'm not judgmental. My family has a ton of alcoholics in it. I've been around it. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've lived with it. And again, I'm not judgmental. You're a good person. But in your current condition, I can't let you make a big decision about a plea deal until you go to rehab. And you know what my response was?
Tell us.
What condition? What condition? I've got the government, starting out at 25 years in prison, getting down to 18 months. And then I'm ending up drinking alone, isolated. I'm losing my house. I'm going to go to prison. So I went to Cleveland because Mark said I should be thrown from the law profession to let you make this kind of major decision. So I was forced into rehab. My first AA meeting in the Cleveland Clinic, I sat there and I, of course, took everybody's inventory. Well, that girl over there, she's drinking and doing heroin. She doesn't have a job. I'm unemployed.
Sure,
oh, my goodness. Luckily, I'm not like her. So, I spent more time. And then, of course, my mind said, well, this was created in 1935. I think we can redo this, rewrite it, maybe take it and NA and make them a lot different. So after 3 days, I checked myself out of the Cleveland Clinic, And here was my bright light moment. My mother was having emergency surgery. My sister said she may not make it. I drove to Wheeling, West Virginia. Mom survived. So on the way back from Wheeling to Newark, Ohio, I stopped in Cambridge, Ohio, got off at Route 209 exit, went to the parking lot of the Point Bar, one of my hangouts, and I sat there. A guy and his wife lived down the street. He had worked for me. I said, John, can I stay at your house tonight? Because I know what I was going to do. Now, my lawyer said, stay low key, stay in rehab. We're trying to make a plea deal. So what am I doing? I'm in a bar. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go in. I'm going to get blasted out of my mind. Do Lord knows what. I sat there and I thought, I'm insane. Something's wrong with me. Well, see, Mom lived, so I was going to drink. Had Mom died, which she lived through the operation, I would drink.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So I called a rehab center. Make a long story short, I went up to the rehab center. And then on my 30th day sober, 2006, Friday the 13th, all right, October, I'm standing in Washington, D.C. before a woman in a black dress named Judge Lavelle. Mm-hmm. And I've got my coin from my friend, Old Bill.
Yeah.
My first coin, I still have it in my wallet today. And I stood there and I did my plea deal. Now, I wanted to drink so bad. I was white knuckling it, et cetera, et cetera. But I kept going. So I got a sponsor, Russ, mm-hmm. and I called him and I said, I'm losing my house. What do I do? Russ said, don't drink.
Sure.
The electric's going to get shut off. What do I do? Russ said, don't drink. I want to hear how I fight Countrywide Mortgage. I want to hear, don't drink. Tell me how to keep my electric on. Tell me how to do this and how to do that. So I stayed with it. I kept coming back to the meetings. Now, as I got sober, which was September 13, 2006, I entered prison, which would have been March of 2007. But in that period of time, after I got sober, which I'm like, wow, first time in 34 years, I lost my house, my car, all my money. I did a plea deal of 18 months. Judge thought 30 months looked much better than 18. Oh, yeah. And Russ, we went from 18 months to 30. What do I do? That's what Russ said.
Don't drink.
Don't drink.
Don't drink. So I went to federal prison, and I went to a wonderful rehab program in federal prison. And in that rehab program, because people say, oh, they're mean to me in rehab. It was a prison rehab program. Mm-hmm. You can say whatever you want. It was quite enlightening. So I went through that whole process, got out of prison, and I continued to go to meetings. Of course, I met both of you, and I've continued to go to meetings. I go to meetings all the time. One reflection I'll have, and I'll be quiet, and we can share some conversation together.
Sure.
I sat at my first meeting in Newark, Ohio. It was the 9 a.m. meeting. That would have been back in September of 2006. I saw some people who were still there today, and I thought, they've got 10 years sober, 15 years sober. They must have the most boring lives on planet Earth. What are they doing here? And you've got 19 years and some change sober now. One day at a time. Mm-hmm. I can relapse tonight. I'm not dumb. I see at these meetings, I don't have the most exciting life, but I have a good life. I traveled to India. I got out of prison. I got a radio gig. I was flipping houses. All these things. I still go to India for the spiritual side, but I kept coming back, and I did the steps, and I listened to what you all had to say in the rooms, and to this day, I go to meetings almost every day, if not, every other day. And I will continue to go to meetings because it's my maintenance. It's not that, I'm bored and I just want to run to a meeting. I do it because it helps keep me alive. It helps keep me balanced because meetings to me are the number one. Everything else, my kids, my grandkids, my loved ones, my friends, my job, everything else centers off of this wonderful program.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, we talk about the promises all the time, and you know, the promises don't say that we're going to be free from economic insecurities. It just says we're not going to worry about them anymore. You know, things move on. So yeah, we, you know, our lives do get better.
Yeah, and I always enjoy hearing your story, Bob. And you know, heard you, you know, one-on-one in the car, just having lunch and stuff. Seen you speak at podiums, at meetings and stuff. But you know, that story that you tell it parallels just about everybody in addiction or in recovery. You know, we do these things, we don't see a problem with them. A lot of alcoholics and addicts, you know, exceed expectations and really excel in life, and they go on and do great things, whether it's teachers or lawyers or, you know, athletes or musicians. And people just go and they do these awesome things with their life. And the drinking is always there. And then when you talk about, you know, having, you know, the ability, the means to do it, to advance the disease that you were, you know, blessed with, you know, I hear that same story, just substitute different, you know, career paths. And, you know, when people hit bottom, you know, it's always, it's usually pretty catastrophic, and yours certainly was. And it's not what people do to get to the bottom. It's what they do once they reach that point. And I think you have done a tremendous job, in helping Paul and myself and countless other people, to share your story and your experience, you know, strength and hope about how to rebuild, and how, you know, the new life does not have to look anything like the old life, for someone to be sober and content and peaceful and happy. And so,
you're correct. And the one thing I tell people quite a lot is this. I mentioned these things I want, you know. Winning an election at 25 in an impossible district, going to the state senate, winning the congressional elections in a 16% Republican index as a Republican. You can imagine how hard it was, right? Nothing stopped me. I won the races. But you know the race I couldn't win, the opponent I couldn't defeat.
Which one?
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell that story. It's not to say, oh, look what I did. It's to say how powerful this drug is. I had a career people would cut their finger off to have, and the money, you know, and the life that I've had. And the power of this alcohol and drugs made it not matter to me. It didn't give me the insight. And I thought I was a functional alcoholic. How I hate that word. I wasn't functional. It just took me longer to hit the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard someone else explain that concept. You know, a functioning alcoholic is someone who needs alcohol to function.
Yeah. Yes.
And so that's us. That's the three of us. That's a lot of our audience. That's the people we sit in meetings with. And you know, at some point, I am no longer in control. The alcohol is. There's that old Irish adage that first the man takes the drink, then the drink takes the drink, and then the drink takes the man. And I could see that, you know, play out in my life with a little bit of hindsight now. But yeah, in the moment, I think we're just going through the motions. We're just doing what we're doing. We're excelling. We're getting praise and recognition. And meanwhile, there's this part of us on the inside that is just crumbling, and nobody sees it until, you know, it's super evident to everyone.
I thought I could beat it because look what we're taught in America. You know, belly up to the bar. You know, second place is go for first place. You know, we win wars except the last three. You know, we're taught all these things. Fight it. That was hard for me to, you know, I can fight this. I fight elections, you know, I debate people, et cetera, for a living. And all of a sudden, you know, I realized that, yeah, you have to surrender. And I have to realize I'm not infallible, and that this thing can take a hold of me, and it, you know, it's dressed every morning waiting for me. So, you know, I had to learn that lesson. I really did. In order to be able to deal with this disease, I had to realize the way you have to, you know, approach this disease. And one other thing, and I won't tell a bunch of stories, but this kind of shows you something. I went to Israel during the Intifada. I was, with the congressional trip. So I went to Israel, and I was at the King David Hotel. And when you're there, the Israelis provide security, and we have our own army security that travels with us. They seal the floor off so it's members only, for security reasons. And they set up a control room with anything you want, all the alcohol you want, you name the brand, beer, Merlot, Jägermeister, whatever you want, it's put into that room for you, this control room, they call it. At taxpayers' expense, I may add. And so that evening, the guy assigned to me, his name was Earl. And that evening, I said to a couple of the people on the trip, at 11 o'clock at night, we need to sneak out and go to a bar in the old quarter, the Arab quarter of Jerusalem. And we did. And I told Earl that I was retiring for the evening, and we left the King David Hotel, got a car, and went, and was during the Intifada uprising, and went to drink in a bar. Well, when I got back, Earl had realized, I was gone. They were in a panic. It could have been a horrible incident. Terribly, somebody could have got killed. It could have been embarrassing if we didn't get killed for the government, and the whole 9 yards. And Earl at that time, wonderful man. He was 1 month from retirement. And he said to me, I care about what happens to you, but also he said it would be my fault if you were gone. I could have cost Earl his retirement.
Sure.
And he said, well, I feel bad about it, Earl. Because the alcohol took away my humanity.
Oh, absolutely.
And I could have cost this wonderful man, literally, his retirement through no fault of his own. And it not just takes away cars and houses and things. It takes away our spirit, our humanity. It takes away, at least for my case, it took away my thinking. And I got that back. And I learned one lesson, too, because after this, I had a heart attack, as you know, and I didn't have medical coverage. And I'm sitting there going, here we go again. I lost my money once. And I sat there and I thought, what does history tell me? Just don't drink.
Don't drink. Sure.
7 years later, I'm talking to y'all. I'm doing okay. Don't have everything that I would like, but I have everything that I need, and I'm sober. That's number one. And you all are sober, and that makes me happy when I see you. And I've seen the tragedies as you all have, of people who simply didn't make it because they thought they could have that one drink or that one drug.
Well, we are coming up on a hard break. And so we will take a little break. For those of you who are listening online, it will be a 2-week break. But for Bob, it's going to be about a 5-minute break until I get everything reset. And so for those of you listening, thanks so much for coming and listening. And hopefully you come back in 2 weeks and we finish this conversation.
Yeah, I think we want to guide this conversation towards, the recovery aspect. You talked about going to India. That was something that you and I did together, and I would love to dive back into that. The spirituality side of this and give you a chance to maybe even plug the book. We just want to talk about the recovery side of things a little bit more in detail and just hear more about, your journey and bounce back and forth some of the things that Paul and I have experienced too. So everybody, we appreciate you guys listening. Bob, thank you for being on. We will have you back on in about 30 seconds real time, 2 weeks, broadcast time. So thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of any affiliated organization. This content is for informational purposes only and is not intended for professional advice. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Until next time.